I'd like to call this meeting of the Fargo School Board into session. I want to thank you all for being with us this evening. Our first order of business is approval of the agenda, but before I take a motion to that effect, I need to add item 5D, which will be an HR addendum that should be located at your work locations. And with that change, I'd entertain a motion.
I move that we accept the agenda with the additional HR item.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Any opposed signify by saying no. Motion carries. Nobody had signed up to address the audience this evening, although we have lots of folks here that will be sharing with us through the course of the evening. So we'll move right on to staff reports. And Laura, any news from the FEA?
Yes, I brought along Dakota Draper, who's also a member sitting on our executive council, and he has a report.
Yes, I would just like to report I teach at Woodrow Wilson High School, and our kids today were out raking the neighbors' lawns, led by our principal here, David Berkman, and he just informed me that I was up in my little third floor, and I could watch them out there doing their hard work. And we had 19 kids out there, and you said we did seven yards, so I don't know if any press was there, but anyway, they were out doing some good work for us.
Super. Well, and just for those that are relatively new on the board, David is kind of recycling because years ago he sat in that very location and gave president's reports for the FEA. So welcome back. Move on to our next staff report, and I'll call on Dr. Gross to do the introductions.
Great, thank you very much. A few meetings ago, you had a report from our 3 comprehensive high school principals as they shared some data about their schools and some of the programmings that were going on there. Tonight, Mr. David Berkman is here to share with you some information about Woodrow Wilson High School, and that way give you the true picture of all 4 of our high schools. So with that, I will turn over to Mr. Berkman.
Good evening. I will not try to top the Andy and Troy show, but hope to present some worthwhile information to you. Pictures worth 1,000 words. I'm going to take you through a little bit of a slideshow of some of the pictures of activities and events at Woodrow Wilson High School. When you see the students' responses in a senior survey saying that 97% know that their staff care about them, 95% think that students treat each other with respect at Woodrow, I think it is helpful to see a few snapshots of what life is like at Woodrow. When students finish, this would be our informal graduation walk. Staff doing a cookie decorating with the preschoolers, Woodrow staff, Woodrow students. A couple more informal graduation walks. Words of wisdom that we post up from time to time. Wonderful counselor, Jenny Rude. Fill the Dome Day, the Woodrow Wilson students. We do think it's important that we have a lot of students from an at-risk population that we serve and we give back to the community. So this would have been from last year's Fill the Dome Woodrow WW. Davies North and South have the honors program. Woodrow has our accolades program. Since there's a different set of standards to achieve honors at Woodrow, we have a different name for it called accolades. So this would be from our accolades ceremony that we had last year. More graduates. Trip to the Capitol 2 years ago. More senior walks. Isla with our new shirt. Accolades from this past year. These were students who had hit the mark for us. Sometimes parents come up to the informal graduation walk, and this is just a snapshot of a happy graduate with very happy parents and a happy advisor. Another accolades student. adult English learner students holding a carved pumpkin. We do a fair amount of partnering with the Adult Learning Center as well as early childhood special ed. And it's a chance for Woodrow students to exhibit leadership and acculturation pieces for our new Americans. And sometimes I think it's pretty cool to see a new American working alongside an alternative ed student with pink hair and just having a really wonderful conversation about life as they are working on a project. Our SRO has basketball with the cops every other Wednesday. Typically gets about 11 to 12 students in. Play some basketball, eat some pizza, and it's a big draw for students. So just a couple more. Again, just giving you an idea of life at Woodrow that is reflected in our senior survey. And I think I'll stop with this slide here, which is just another Woodrow Early Childhood Even Start Adult Learning Center carnival activity. And Mr. Dent firing I don't even know what you call it, little poof of smoke comes out and shoots across the room. Thank you. All right, so getting to the senior survey parts of the presentation, we are here to get students to a high school diploma. We do have a lot of students. We have some students who might not hit that mark, but that citizenship skills that they gain as well. Besides getting the high school diploma, we want to have good neighbors. We want to have productive community members. So that citizenship, very important as well. Our motto at Agassiz, we have 3 R's with a heavy dose on the respect piece. Telling our students, current students and incoming students that we're a choice school, really 2 things for them to consider if they would like to be a part of this choice school. One is respect. It's really a non-negotiable for us. We're very happy to reteach it, to learn how to be respectful, but ultimately, it's a non-negotiable for us. The student, if there were Woodrow students here tonight, they would say, yeah, it's not just principals saying the words, it's a part of the culture. It is a non-negotiable. Our other non-negotiable is we all do the Homer Simpson from time to time. Sometimes we do the Einstein as well, but somewhere in between there is we're going to make mistakes. So fix your mistakes and learn from them. So 2 important pieces of our culture. One is respect, non-negotiable. We're here to help you teach it. We're here to learn it together. And second non-negotiable is, hey, when you make mistakes, fix them and learn from them. Our schedule that students will be making some comments on the senior survey. Student A, Algebra 2.2 in the morning for 2.5 hours. And lunchtime is an hour, and then the student A, English, junior English semester 2 would be their entire afternoon of 2.5 hours. Most students have 2 classes. Some have a couple of skinnies, as you can see. Student B having a skinny in the lunch. Their afternoon is half Phi Ed and half biology. Student C picking up the early bird art. That would be about the maximum number of classes a student could be at would be 4. So framing that schedule, most students 2 classes, some of them up to 4. Who teaches econ? Dakota would be econ. Recent graduation data, had a smaller group of seniors last year. We do ask our students, hey, is this Woodrow diploma better, same, or worse than a North, South, or Davies? And the answer is, well, it's a high school diploma. It's the same. In the data, you'll see that our students go on college, career, life ready, work, military, trade school. You'll see that data coming up. All right, so now getting to some of the senior survey responses. Number of grads, how many responded. The blue column would be the previous year, 15-16, and 16-17 to the far right. The the bottom two boxes would be just a look at, okay, so we had 11 transfers from Davies, north or south, that spent less than a year. And the bottom box would be saying, well, what percentage of Woodrow graduates are from Fargo and what percentage might be from new students coming in? And last year, 42% would have spent less than a year at Davies, north or south, or any other Fargo school. So about 58% would have come through Fargo Public Schools for at least a year. Any questions on this particular data slide?
So the 42% that came from, is it somewhere else? Or to have spent less than a year at one of the three other high schools, how do they get into Woodrow? Where do they come from?
In a given week, we'll have 4 to 5 new students coming to us. 3 of the 4 are from in-district and about 1 out of 4 are out of district. So a student could come directly to Woodrow Wilson, not go to Davies North or South. In fact, this time of the year, it's a little bit easier for them to do that because if you're jumping into Davies North or South and you're right in the middle of the quarter, it can be a little messy. So again, 4 to 5 students a week coming to us new, and 80% of them being from in district. 1 out of 4 just they're coming to Fargo Public Schools and electing to start at Woodrow. And I would say of those, 90% have come from an alternative setting to Fargo and are looking for an alternative setting. All right, continuing on. Some of the demographics here of graduates. Going on to the next slide. We have an advisory program at Woodrow for credit. Department of Public Instruction allows alternative schools to offer advisory program for elective credit. And that would be a big piece of our students becoming attached with at least one adult in the building, this advisory program for credit. How that's reflected in the senior survey is when our students are talking about an adult knows me well their advisor should know them very well because they meet weekly to bi-weekly. So post-secondary plans, again, 15, 16, and 16, 17 data. And any questions or comments on this particular set of data?
So about a third planning to go to four-year college. Is that an anomaly? Is the 10% the year before the anomaly? I suppose with a small sampling, it kind of goes up and down, but typically, do a third of Woodrow graduates plan to go to four-year college?
Longitudinal data, I don't have that here tonight. I would say the 32% is a large jump. I would say it's typically in the low to mid-teens. It'll be interesting as a Woodrow team, we're on the college-ready, career-ready indicators, looking at how to increase the number of 2-year and 4-year college-ready students. This was our first year of effort into it, but it'll be interesting to see what the data shows next year. But it's something that we are very cognizant of. All right, formal cap and gown ceremony. Similar to Davies North and South, we have them in our Woodrow Wilson Gymnasium. This year will be on Friday, June 1st of 2018. A few pictures from graduations past. All right, getting into that climate culture piece of Woodrow, agree and strongly agree responses. And 2.5% teachers have high expectations, goals. Any questions or comments on what you're seeing? It just speaks volume of the connected piece that we're able to achieve with the school size that we have. That is reflected in the numbers. All right, informal graduation walk I had mentioned. When a student finishes their last class, we bring everybody up on the 3rd floor, do a little hooting and hollering and introduce the new graduate and explain what their plans are. For the student who's reluctant to do that, we say, hey, you don't have to say a word. You get to walk down a hall and inspire an entire school full of students because you made it. So we get just about all of them that will agree to be that inspiration. So a lot of genuine smiles on the day that happens. So from the senior survey, what are 2 things that could be done to improve your school? It's probably a little hard to see that. Updating mats, nothing. Better communication of schedule, I don't know. Lower some distractions. Attendance enforce more. School lunch, less online, more classes, harsher punishments. Better explanation of classes, better school lunch program, warm water in the bathroom. More team building activities, stricter respect for staff, lunch, computer, and resources. Again, on the culture piece, at my school, other students treat me with respect. School safety. Any questions or comments? Okay.
Truly believe numbers like this only come about because of the leadership in the building and the teaching staff in the building. So hats off to your team.
Thank you. Great team at Woodrow. And I believe it's the last slide here. Things that you appreciate about your school. And again, I'll just highlight some of these because they're difficult to read from the distance. Teachers, for sure. Teachers in freedom, easygoing, working at my schedule. Super cooperative and understanding team. Their willingness and efforts to help any way possible. Students and staff respect you. They always want the best for you. Staff lunch. We do some luncheons together. Diversity, the help, the support, the teachers, the alternative learning, the fact that you can go at your own pace and not have to feel rushed. Enjoy the teachers here a lot. Definitely will be missing them. Staff and Ness the cop. The fact that staff works with students and their problems to help them succeed. Teachers, students, very kind staff. And these are just kind of a sampling. There's another 21 responses that would be similar in what the students communicate. Volunteering at Woodrow, as Dakota had mentioned, we did our leaf raking today. It's important for the students to find that purpose, even if they may be struggling through life. Find value, find that they can make a difference. There may be some things they can't do, but there are things that they can do. And we work to build on those leadership and volunteering skills. That's how we look every day. That had been from the ugly sweater around Christmas time last year. And the caption, all new students to Woodrow see this caption. Woodrow Wilson, a terrific team of educators who love students and love helping students succeed. So all newcomers would be seeing that, and then once they're in, they get to see if we mean what we say. So, snapshots of Woodrow.
Anybody have any questions? John?
I've said it before and I'll say it again, and this is just another reason to say it. What a gem. I'm so proud of Woodrow Wilson. I'm so proud of like Jim said, the leadership you exhibit there, the team you have. When you go back, please extend thanks from all of us to the excellent job they do. And I'm just really proud, and all of our community should know about this and be very, very proud of what we have here. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm always fascinated by the inter-program and intergenerational things you do, you know, the high school students with the little kids and with the adult language learners. Is that something that you expand on every year? You kind of have a certain amount of it every year? Is that something that is growing? That always fascinates me, and I love that that happens in that building. If you could just speak to that element a little bit.
We have some amazing teacher PLCs over at Woodrow. PLC, BCC, Behavior, Climate, Culture. They will experiment with various opportunities for our students to interact with other programs. And for the most part, they give it a 2 or 3 year run, and then they will adjust or modify. Our staff will collaborate with early childhood staff. Hey, how this worked for you? What might we want to try differently next time? So it has morphed through the years, and it will continue to morph.
Dakota, did I see you waving at me?
Yes, thank you. I just want to add something. As amazing as the staff is and our leadership is, you saw in our students are just as amazing. I came back from my presidency when I was in DEA, and I landed at Woodrow, and I'm so glad I did. It's such a tremendous challenge, but yet a lot of thrills. But you saw as some of those pictures went by, there were probably 2 or 3 homeless kids in that group that we saw. These kids have enormously hard lives, and they come to us, and you see great things happen. Sometimes not totally great, but you see a lot of challenge. I have a young man right now who's living in a hotel with his mother. He's coming every day because he can get the meal, but he's also working every day too. He has other issues along with that, but we see a lot of fantastic growth in our kids, and it's really heartwarming to see that, and I want to put that in the room. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And again, as John said, pass along the board's thanks to your entire team. Absolutely, as you said, a gem for Fargo Public Schools.
Okay. Thank you.
Dr. Gross, I think you're up again.
I am. Thank you very much. Each year we try to provide for you an update on our English language program. And over the past few years, there's been a different person at the podium presenting, Fonnie Sanders, then Vince Williams. And tonight, David Berkman will be here with his team members to share information about our English Learner program and the wonderful things that are happening across our entire system as we have the opportunity to work with many of our new American families. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to David, and he's going to introduce the additional guests.
Very good. It's nice to have Dakota here on the Woodrow side tonight, by plan or by chance, but it's how it worked out. You're going to get a lot of up-down presentation from not me doing a lot of the talking, but a lot of the EL staff doing talking. Rockstar group, amazing group of EL teachers and social workers behind me. I think when they come up to say their piece, because they're all going to be saying a piece, I'll have them introduce themselves at that time, okay? So switching gears to the ELL program, absolute treat to join a team that's highly functional, that is extremely passionate about kids. Woodrow's always been passionate about kids. EL staff, extremely passionate about the students that they serve and helping them be successful. So it's been very fun to join this team. First slide. A little more information. And then finishing off the picture. Lori Nappy, one of the presenters tonight, had forwarded this when I said we're doing a board presentation if you'd have any clever ideas to share, and this comes from Lewis and Clark. You'll find out more about a level 1 kinder is in the presentation. WIDA, Jeopardy for 1,000, please, Alex. What does WIDA stand for? We're part of the WIDA consortium for English language learners. Anybody? Oh, no. 3 states started WIDA many, many years ago: Wisconsin, Delaware, Arkansas. Wow. Talk about a diverse group starting a language consortium. So we are in the WIDA consortium, which originally was Wisconsin, Delaware, and Arkansas. And with these numbers, I'm going to step back and pass this off to Tamara.
Thank you. My name is Tamara Hoffman, EL social worker, and I serve at Jefferson, Carlbin, and South, and we have 2 other social workers also. Just kind of looking at numbers today, I think at those 3 schools, we have over 310 students at just those 3 schools that I serve. So our job as EL social worker really is to do whatever it takes to help our kids do well in school. So as these numbers kind of show too, there's just quite the diversity in our district with 1,200 current and former EL students. With the greatest group, the Nepali, we have 18% that speak Nepali, followed by Arabic, Somali, and Spanish, kind of to round out some of the top ones. But sometimes people ask me, like, you're an EL social worker, do you like speak all those languages? I'm like, no. We are so blessed to have interpreters and bilingual paras that help us in our schools. So that helps us quite a bit. Our focus as social workers really does focus on 3 different areas, those including school, home, and community. School things, and we're not limited to the things I'm saying. I'm limited on time, but I'm not limited on the things that we can do. But as far as school goes, we can go into the classrooms, we can observe what happens, we help with behaviors, we help with team meetings, parent-teacher conferences, coordinating all of those efforts, attendance if our kids are not in school. We often are asked to try to figure out why they're not in school, what's the barrier, what can we do to help them. And home, that's like a big part of what we do is the home visit piece. Just learning more about our kids, what home is like, what happens at home. And we also just bridge the gap between school and home. Oftentimes, our students and families respect our schools and our teachers in the United States so much. They feel like, they'll just take care of it at school, but we really want our parents and families to see that they're an integral part of our education here. And so we make great efforts to welcome them into our schools and just bridge that gap. And then the last one is community. We really want to connect our families with what they need. It can be anything from basic needs, food, shelter, clothing. If kids are hungry, they're not going to be able to learn. So we're out there kind of in the trenches sometimes, getting food baskets if that's needed, filling out applications for families, or referring them to agencies or people that can fill out those forms for them so that they have what they need. Medical appointments, we attend appointments with families. Sometimes they just can't get to the appointments or the system's barriers are so great that they just need someone to kind of walk along with them. So we do that too. Immunizations, kids need immunizations to be in school. So our administrators and nursing staff ask us to support that and help families to get the necessary immunizations that they need too. And then mental health appointments. If families and students need that kind of support, we'll make those referrals. And not even just make those referrals, but we'll go along with them and help them because just the barriers and that type of thing can be pretty daunting for some of our families. So we walk along with them and share that journey with them if they need that. And for many cultures, mental health, there's a stigma with that. So it's just helping them understand that we all have mental health and what that looks like and how we can help them. So we do that as well. And with the ultimate goal for us as social workers is that when they're sitting in the classrooms, in our schools, in front of amazing teachers like we have in the Fargo district, that they will be ready to learn. So that's basically kind of how we support our program.
Any questions or comments for the EL social work? This is Tamara's one slide. She won't be back. Now, would you ever welcome a board member to maybe tag along for some events?
Absolutely, I would encourage that. I'd love to have people come along and our families, hospitality is
Next slide is the home language survey, and you can see the numbers over the past few years. Noteworthy at the bottom, 48 Chinese speakers, 48 Chinese speakers. If there were under 50 students in a cell, their data wasn't included, so those had to go back and be manually pulled. And I'm going to turn over the home language survey. So this would be based off home language survey to Lori, who's going to talk a little bit about what do you do with a home language survey? What function does that have in the process?
My name is Lori Nappy. I'm the EL teacher at Lewis and Clark Elementary, and I love my job. The next two slides display North Dakota's EL Student Identification Program flow chart. During registration, the home language survey may indicate a second look. If the significant influence of a second language is determined to be present, the student is tested for program placement. If scores qualify the student for EL services, an individual language plan is written and parent notification is made. The student receives language support and English language proficiency assessment that continues yearly until the student meets the exit criteria from the state of North Dakota.
He said 30 seconds. Thank you, Lori. Takeaways from this is the home language survey is a ticket in, and then there's testing that happens to see if the student would be receiving programming or not. Next slide's up. Who are we serving right now? Jasmine Ersink is a teacher over at Discovery, and she's going to explain, well, who is here now.
Jasmine Ersink at Discovery, like you said. I don't need my notes. It's going to be on the slide. So currently at Fargo, we have 916 enrolled English language learners, English language students, English learners students, I'm sorry. They dropped one of the L's. I always forget which one it is. We have 517 in the elementaries, 155 in the middle schools, and 245 in the high school. So as our population in Fargo continues to grow, so does our EL population. So as you can see, since 2013, our population has grown just as much as the Fargo population. It's been a pretty steady number there. So it's pretty significant. We keep adding schools and keep adding students, and yet we keep adding ELs as well. So as far as the home languages, since 2013, again, we've had a pretty steady number of languages spoken in our EL homes. A little bit less since 2015, but so in the schools currently there's 1,234 current and former English learners. Former students still typically monitored. We continue to watch their grades and their classes for the next 2 to 3 years, depending on how they're doing after they have exited the program. And those students represent 58 countries. 11% of Fargo Public Schools enrollment is made up of current and exited students. So 45% born in the U.S. Majority of those still have parents in the home who speak no English, even if they were born in the U.S. So it's important that they still receive that English in the schools and have our support as the English learner or as the English learner teachers, because they're not usually getting that English support at home. And then the other 55% is made up of refugees and immigrants.
Next slide, you're looking at enrollments by building for the past 5 years. There's two ways to look at the data that makes this a little bit messy. If you look at 2016-17, you'll note that there were 977 students that Power School will pull and say, if you add up the numbers, you'll get to 977. The red numbers at the bottom, 808 to 861, that is the monthly enrollment of English learners we had last year. What's the discrepancy in data piece? Well, going to the top, a student at Bennett may have moved to Centennial midway through the year. If they did move midway through the year, they're pulled on the Power School count for Bennett and Centennial. So there's a couple of, well, if doing the math, there's probably about, you could figure out a mobility rate of maybe 70 or 80 students moved within district last year. But the red numbers at the bottom are very solid by month. Last year, we started at 808. We ended in May with 861 students in 16-17. Is the number 977 more important than 861 or the 808 number? Well, if I was to ask this awesome group of EL teachers, if a new student starts with them, you still have to do the access testing. You still have to write an ILP. You still need to build a schedule for them. So that number 977 really is valid in the sense that we had to get a program set up for the student. They may have moved from school to school, but that student needed to be served. The red numbers at the bottom are valid in that actual live number within each of the buildings is how many students we are serving. Looking at this year, it says 916. That was September. Our October number is the number in red to the right, 958. So we are currently at 958 as of October number of EL students that we are serving. Questions or comments regarding any of the trends that you are seeing? I think of surprise, noteworthy, Jefferson, which Tamara had mentioned, 114 students, Ed Clapp, 114 students. Those two schools really very similar in numbers. Davies numbers, one of the sharper increases as well over the past 5 years. Not catching South yet, but definitely increasing in numbers of students. The blue at the bottom means that don't have that data readily available for those particular years. Current projections, President Trump released USA refugee resettlement at 45,000. At the refugee resettlement meeting, LSS thought it would be 50,000, was what they were hearing, and it ended up being 45,000. What that means is for new arrivals in Fargo, these would be the anticipated numbers for the year, which really LSS said that our student numbers should almost just be very even for what they have been the past several years. All right. Turning over service time to Cindy Benson is EL teacher over at South.
So this slide talks about how much service our students get per day. And this is from the North Dakota State ELL Program Advisory Committee. And these are recommendations, they're not requirements. And you can see that, as the student advances, that they get less service. So they start at level 1, it's recommended 3 or 4 units of ELL service. For level 2, 2 to 3, level 3, 1 to 2, and level 4, 1 unit of service. There's a little thing at the bottom that explains what a unit is. And that's a class period, so that varies from elementary to high school. At high school, they get the most time, 50 minutes per unit. It's, I think, 44 minutes at middle school, if I remember right, and maybe about 30 at elementary school. And I would say that for the high school, I can speak for the high school, and we do meet this standard. In fact, sometimes we exceed it. I think the next slide will kind of explain when you see what kind of classes we have, why that happens. But I think definitely, if I can speak for the high school, we do meet this level of service for our students. Go to the next slide, which is.
Nicole Weiss is behind me. She's the new admin assistant for EL and doing just an outstanding job with it. She and I are working on a very huge data project of if there's 114 at Jefferson and there's 114 at Ed Clapp, how many level 1s are there? How many level 2s are there? How many level 3s? How many level 4s? And as you can see by the previous slide, if I was to tell you I have a building of 114 level 3s and 4s, or I had a building of 114 mostly level 1s or 2s, that staffing needs for the lower levels would be very, very much higher. So she and I are working on a very large, very large project, number of students by building, by access level, their English language proficiency, and by minutes of service. We find very resourceful teams in the buildings that as the student number goes up and the staffing has been relatively stable, they'll add a few students to each of the sections. They get very creative with how to meet student needs. And then when a building were to say, we could really use some more EL staffing, where does one start? We need to have a very solid data format platform to make decisions from. So thanking Nicole for helping with this. This is a very big project. I guess I'm introducing Amy Burdick, Davies teacher.
All right, so our access test is given to students every, early in the spring semester. There's a 6-week testing window in late January and then through most of February. And this is the proficiency test that's given once a year to all students K through 12. In last year, for the 16-17 school year, we experienced a pretty significant change in how the proficiency scores are calculated for our students. So the standards themselves are not changing. The rubrics look the same, the standards look the same, but the expectations for how to perform on those assessments changed pretty dramatically. The test itself looks the same, especially if you're proctoring it. The questions aren't necessarily harder, but again, students have to meet a higher level of proficiency to exit. And so what we saw last year when we looked at our data was that we weren't seeing as many students exit. So again, this is a helpful picture here, just that our proficiency has generally increased for what we require for a student to say, yep, you've exited, you speak and read and write and listen to English at the same level of your peers that were born in the United States as native English speakers. So this shows kind of our annual data trends for who falls into those different proficiency level categories. You'll see some pretty big changes as we get between the 2015 and the 2016 school year. Of note, WIDA didn't think this was actually very important, but back in the 2015 year was actually the first year that the test switched the listening portion from a proctor reading it in person to it being played on a CD. That alone threw our listening scores way out of whack. They went down. The pacing of the listening CD was very slow and students lost track of what they were doing. So that year was wonky. Then 2015, we moved to all computer-based. Now, for some of our students, that's not an issue. They have student PLDs. Computer skills are high. For our newcomers, we can't type. We can't, even really work a computer. So that threw off our scores again. And then in 2016-17, they adjusted the proficiency scales. So for the past 3 years, we've had to be kind of analyzing our data with various grains of salt because everything was changing on us. But what it means is less students are exiting. So we need to take a look at how do we adjust our curriculum, how do we adjust our standards that we're teaching to make sure that we get kids exiting. If you look at the scores, you see like your level 4 from 15-16 was at 23%, and that was pretty standard, down to only 16% now with the new proficiency scales. Level 5s, which would be approaching exiting, went from the low teens to 1%. So that's a big change for us, and it will be a big change going forward of how to continue reaching those exit goals.
It takes, on average, 1 to 3 years to acquire BICS, which is conversational English, and 5 to 7 years to acquire CALP, which is academic language, and these two proficiencies are attained side by side. So not only are they learning to say, I need to use the bathroom, how do I sharpen my pencil, they're learning how an angelfish is luminescent with their underwater. Elementary EL teachers are licensed in both elementary and to be highly qualified, we're licensed in both elementary and EL. At our level, we try to have 5 students in a group. The challenge there is different levels, different ages. I have had students who might be in kindergarten and second grade would make a really great group, but would that help them with their self-esteem? And when you are an elementary teacher, you're mostly doing pull-outs. Some teachers do push in. Every building gets to decide what is best for their students. So you're working with K through 5 teachers and lunch and gym and music. At my building, I'm only allowed to pull out during science and social studies for one very good reason. REACH is the first time that Fargo Public Schools has had an EL elementary curriculum, and we all have it. Thank you, Dr. Gross, for that. It's a language-based program based on grade level science and social studies standards. It's the same company that has made the elementary science standards, so when a student is in 4th grade learning about earth science, they're also with me reading about a scientist who is studying volcanoes. So when I pull them out of science, they're still getting some science with me and still getting that same vocabulary at their level. Every lesson within REACH engages the student in listening, speaking, reading, and writing, which are our 4 important domains. And it alternates between fiction and nonfiction stories, the same way that the new literacy, it's called Journeys, which is the classroom literacy program that they get in their classroom, is the same type of format that we have when they come to us. So they're really learning side by side with their peers, but they're learning at their level. And we can go slower and we can find their needs. That might be different than a classroom teacher is able to do.
At the middle level, standard of effort, meaning what we hope to have our classroom sizes. Level 1 students, we hope to have 8 students at a max. However, in the past few years with more students, less teachers, we've been up to 16, maybe 20 in some cases for our level 1s, which gets very difficult to serve those students, but we do our best. Level 2 to 4 students, we like to cap our classrooms at 10. But again, past years, more students, less staff. We've had 16 to 20, depending on the year, depending on the time of year. And at some points, we move students who we think will be successful in maybe a higher level class, but still a lower level of English. And then we have a resource class, which is for our higher students, 3s, 4s, maybe even recently exited students. We can help them with their mainstream homework and try and bridge the gap between their EL classrooms and their new classrooms with their peers. And we have had a steady number of 10 to 15 students in our resource classes at the middle school level. In the middle schools, both Carl Ben and Discovery, we serve English language arts, math, and Read 180 System 44. I will say at CBE we have a teacher who is certified in EL teaching both the Read 180 and the System 44. At Discovery we only have an EL certified teaching the System 44 classes, and then they go with a mainstream teacher teaching the Read 180. It's still the software program-based learning, and then we also have resource for our 7th and 8th graders.
So for high school, the standard of effort is pretty similar to middle school. Level 1, we'd like to have 8 students. Levels 2 through 4, 15 students. And then our resource class where students come in for individual homework, we'd like 10 students. And like Jasmine said, this is our ideal, but often we have many more students than that in our classes. Sometimes the level 2s are up over 20, 10 to 15, even 20 in level 1. Resource gets a little over 10, sometimes 2. But really, I think our focus is not on numbers, but we want to make sure that every student gets the appropriate level of service that they need and the number of courses that they need, so we kind of focus on that. I think we've been able to reach that standard of effort, making sure everybody is in, getting the appropriate level of service and the courses that they need to be in. When you look at our classes that we offer a few more at high school. We actually have math, science, social studies, English language, reading, partnership with New Americans, and resource. So every core content class is covered in high school. Really every class that they need to graduate, we have in sheltered EL instruction. The partnership for New Americans, I think they've presented here before with that one, but they are partnered with a mentor, a non-EL student, or maybe a former EL student that helps them just acclimate to school and build relationships with them. And then resources for those students that are pretty much mainstream, but maybe need some support with their homework. Any questions on that before I go on? Okay. This is a few of the things that we use at high school. We use Read 180 and System 44, which teaches the students the system of the sounds in the English language. We've used Rosetta Stone. But I think the really important thing to emphasize about our curriculum, much of it has been written by the EL teachers. They've developed the curriculum. Some are curriculum writing sometimes, PLCs, or have just done a lot of it on their own or meeting, just outside of school. And, they've developed what our students need. They're the ones that know what our students need the best. So I think they're the experts, and they've done a great job with that.
So elementary, middle school, high school. We also offer summer school, 4 weeks in June, 3 weeks in July. The July program for students who are still at that level 1 to level 2. One new development this year that we're very optimistic about is we have a pre-K to adult education. So if Jennifer Free was here, you've seen her speak before. The early child, even start, early family literacy, our kindergarten through 12th grade, and then the adult ELs. All of the teachers have the same 2 goals this year. Sharing a similar goal along with whatever their program might have. The goals come from Marzano, and it could be, first bullet says, supporting strong EL family dynamics in American culture. So if you could picture the whole pre-K to adult staff all together, probably like 40 some of us, everybody having this goal that we need strong families. Data at the top, number 1 protective factor for student mental health and combating adverse childhood experiences. Obvious answer, but it's a strong family supports. So the first goal from adult to K-12 is let's make some strong families. Second goal was on family literacy. So EL teachers working on their Marzano growth goals this year, we've come together pre-K, K-12, and adults to share these same goals. And I guess as we wrap up our EL presentation, again, just an extremely passionate, talented group of educators. When you do your site visits, your school visits with the schools that you're liaisons with, please come in and check out the EL classrooms. There's a lot of wonderful stuff happening. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank your team. Any questions from any board members? John?
I have a question going back to the slide showing the declining percentages of students achieving access scores at level 5 and level 6. How much harder are those? And like what, if I were to take that test, I know I'm a natural speaker, but what are the odds that I achieve a level 6 on that?
I'm going to defer to one of the EL teachers behind me if somebody wants to answer that. What I will say is the state of Michigan used to have a passing rate, for example, state of Michigan of about 13%. This past year, they had under 1%. They recalibrate, in other words, the numbers you're seeing are nationwide. This is not a Fargo or North Dakota phenomenon. This is nationwide. Back to your question, though, John, of what does it take to pass out of it?
So one thing that Lori mentioned, there's a difference between your social language and then your instructional language, your academic language. I feel like sometimes in the past that social component was getting a little bit of a higher percentage in weight than the academic. When I was looking at some of the writing questions and the reading questions that we're seeing, they are full on, science questions that are, multi-step. They're reading charts, tables, reports. It's very, very intense. They truly, when we say that a student has reached a 5.0, we have to be able to say they are on the same level academically, socially, everything with their English as a person who speaks English as a first language. So I was actually talking with David about this earlier today. When you have somebody who starts as a level 1, it's not uncommon for them to jump all the way to a 2, sometimes even to a 3 in their first year with us, because you're starting with nothing. So it's easy to make gains when you had no words, and now at the end of the year you can write a paragraph. So we see big gains there. Then you get into the 4 and the 5, and the nuances in the writing and the nuances in the reading. The amount of vocabulary that they're being assessed on is pretty extraordinary. So we have always expected that a student's going to be a 4 or a 5 longer than they were a 1 and a 2. And that just comes with the level of English that we're asking them to do. Would you pass it? I don't know you, but I think
That's
if
a
you gave
maybe.
it your full attention, I think you would pass it. We also have to remember that these are high school students and middle school students and elementary students. What kind of a day are they having when we give them this one test in the school year? What are their computer skills? Do they prefer to handwrite a paragraph or type it? So there's all these factors. The speaking component's pretty awkward. It's not a face-to-face conversation. They're talking into a microphone, into a computer. So it is hard to reach a 5.0. And like David said, that's nationwide. All of a sudden, no one exited. And so we have already started changing what are we doing in the classroom so that more students are reaching that exit point.
So just to follow up, is this an achievable goal then? I know, it's very new then, what's happening here, and we're adjusting to it. I know we want to have high expectations, but failing to meet those time after time can also be very discouraging.
Oh, definitely. We had a number of students who were extremely disappointed in themselves because they full-on believed they were on track to exit and they missed it. I think that in the next school year for 17-18, we will be more than less than 1% of exiting. I think it's going to take us a while to get back up to the rate that we were at. I think their point is you shouldn't be at that rate necessarily with the way you were teaching things. It's asking everybody to raise the bar and raise the standards and take a look at how they're teaching, especially those upper level kids. The tendency has been, they can survive out in a mainstream class. And we've got too many that need more help down lower. If they can survive in the mainstream class, good, get them out there. What that tells us now is we can't just leave them out there anymore. They need continued support. That might be different classes. How do we get those skills up to the new criteria?
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Dinah?
John kind of asked part of my question, so I'll just comment that I appreciate all of you coming out tonight, but both these presentations I think are so important for the board to understand what's going on in our schools, because as things change with time and your needs change with time, we're the ones who control the money and some of those decisions, and I think it's really important to understand what is going on so that when those questions come up, we know what questions to ask, and we also have a better understanding. So thank you for taking the time, all of you, for coming out. So.
Dr. Schatz? Oh, John?
Just another quick one, maybe kind of related to that. Another one of these slides showed the requirements for a highly qualified teacher, and my eyes kind of bugged out. I was like, holy smokes, they have to be able to teach the subject, number one, and then number two, be specialized in ELL. What's the talent pipeline look for that? And do our local universities, are they partnered with us? to develop that kind of talent, and where does that come from? Thank you.
I think Dr. Schatz has an answer for us.
Well, I know that's something that comes up every time that we meet with the universities. Particularly Moorhead State University seems to be doing more than anybody else to try to increase the number of people who are going into the programs. And so we're hopeful that we're going to start seeing more people that are coming out and available, but Moorhead State's probably the leader. Would you agree, Deb, on that? You guys? Yeah. Maybe. Yeah. Right.
Perspective of being around for a long time, I've been over 20 years, and I was certified in EL and in English, and I was a real rare bird, and that's not true anymore.
Yeah.
We're getting a lot more teachers that are interested in getting EL licensures, and we're getting more people that are dual certified. Another thing that we do for the content area is a little tougher, but we'll hire someone, and then they get 2 years to complete.
It's talked about every time. I was just at a Moorhead State University summit, if you will, with local schools, talking to their education department folks, and that's one big one. Special education is another one. We're seeing fewer and fewer people wanting to go into special education, in particular the more difficult needs areas, and so that's becoming more and more of a problem. But I had one question, and it's to any of the teachers, and I want to hear your opinion on this, because the opinion is usually pretty definitive for some people. And that is, should we be considering a newcomer center with a English immersion for new students who come to us, like West Fargo has, or should we continue with the traditional, go to the traditional classroom, in particular the elementaries, which is a real challenge for teachers, classroom teachers, sometimes when we don't have the support necessary at the elementary level. I would be interested in anybody's opinion on that.
I can only speak from a secondary viewpoint. So elementary may have a different viewpoint than us. I would wholeheartedly say no to a newcomer center. I think we can do it cheaper and better in our schools that we have now. When you get a new kid, they might need some intro classes, and they might be advanced in other areas. I've had a kid that can't, he needs my intro to social studies class. He's got Algebra 1 math skills. I would hate to see a student delayed because they didn't have access to all of the courses at the same time. So when you can house that all in one building, where you can offer intro, I teach intro to social studies, I also teach government and econ. When I can offer that in one setting where they're with peers that are native English speakers, they're exposed to electives of their choice, I think we see English skills increase faster. And I think we see ELL students acclimate to United States culture faster and better than when they're isolated.
Okay, and I know that's been the stance of our district for a long, long time. Our partners over in West Fargo do it different, in particular the elementary level, and so I've seen both. So does anybody want to speak to the elementary level?
I would love to.
Sure.
I wholeheartedly say no also.
Okay.
If I have a brand new, does not speak a word of English first grader, he is going to get so much school language by being in a first grade and just absorbing that and being immersed in English the whole day, and his 30 minutes out with me is specific to his needs. He's going to learn so much more. I have a friend who teaches in West Fargo at the Newcomer Center, and they have rules that work for them, and that's great. The stuff that she tells me, I would think would just crush would crush the students who are coming, because they are with their peers. They get to learn to play school at the Newcomer Center. They are with other ELs for maybe half the day. They get on a bus and then they go for gym and music, which are great courses, but they're not any content courses. They're not hearing, if they're a fourth grader, they're not hearing about the different things in earth science. If they're a third grader, they're not learning about neighborhoods in social studies. They really need that exposure to what every other kid is getting in third grade, and I think it's critical that they would be in the schools for that.
I know that in the past, we've had students come over from West Fargo, and they've been in that newcomer center, and they come with very few credits with it with us. They maybe would have earned 6 or 7 credits that year, and they come with 1 or 2, and that really slows them down as far as graduation. And some of these students are on a really strict timeline. They're trying to get through by the time they're 21, they're behind in school, and I think we would find kids would end up not graduating if we adopted that program. And I think that they suspended their high school program, if I'm right. I know you probably know better than I do, but because of some of those concerns about credits.
Well, and I want it to be clear that, I'm not advocating for that. I just wanted, I wanted you to be able to articulate that because I think that's important. But the challenge becomes then staffing in particular at the elementary level, which we know. But go ahead if you had something else to say.
Sorry. I just wanted to add, and not actually add because they already said it, but I feel like the immersion into the mainstream classroom is, especially my middle school level, where we only get to see them 2 or 3 hours a day, being exposed to all of the English language from their peers, they learn to speak way more than I could teach them in an hour in a day. And just the immersion of the science and the social studies that hopefully we would get one of those teachers in the middle school level with the English language teacher background, but for them to be around other people of their age who can teach them more than I can socially, and then I get to help them on that academic, whereas the center would probably be a lot of trying to do both, and it's hard to do that. So I just wanted to add.
And so the challenge continues for funding for ELL. And so we have continued to pursue that as aggressively as we can. We did get some additional grant dollars with the downturn in the overall state funding. Some of that was cut back. We still have a few additional grant dollars. They tried to do something with the weighted factor. The challenge that we have is a large metro district area, West Fargo, Fargo, really housing the majority of newcomers in the state, is to get others to understand that when we get numbers the size that we have, it becomes an organizational issue too, a structural issue. It's not just having a few ELL teachers and a couple support staff, but it's putting an organizational format and structure to that, and that costs money. And we know that EL programming is underfunded. And so just so you know, from our perspective, Brock and myself, as we work with legislators, that's the first thing on our agenda every time we're talking, is to try to get people to understand that. But it's very difficult at that level. So we'll continue to pursue that for this type of program. But just wanted you to be aware of that. I think it's important that you articulate your stance on how you feel the students should be served, because you're the ones on the front lines. You should know best, and you do know best. And we need to continue then to pursue that, but then we have to find the resources to get enough staffing, and particularly at the elementary level where we are short. Because when Bonnie was here, we looked at that, and we know that. So, and I just want to thank you for the work you do. It's great work, and should be very proud of the program that we have. So thank you.
Well, on behalf of the board, I want to, first of all, thank you for coming out this evening, spending your time, and more importantly, educating us on the important work you're doing day in and day out for the students of Fargo. I don't think enough people understand that you're really serving 10% of our student population, thereabouts. It's a pretty significant amount of the future of Fargo that you're educating, so thank you. And board, we're going to take a stretch break. I can't read that clock. We'll reconvene at 1:45. like to call this meeting back into session. We are to our next staff report, which is an ESSA update from Dr. Gross.
Great. Thank you very much. What I'd like to do tonight is just give you a very brief overview of a few changes that are coming to the state of North Dakota from the new ESSA law, the Every Student Succeeds Act, and then just be very brief with one decision that we've made in Fargo, just to give you some of that information. And then at a later meeting, I'll have more time to dig into some of the details as we look at each of these different components. So to help with that presentation, at your table, there is a one-page document. It is numbered, or page number 42. That is page 42 of the 120-page North Dakota Consolidated State Plan. ESSA was signed into law in December of 2015, and then since that time, moving forward, a planning committee was brought together of about 40 people from across the state of North Dakota, parents, educators, businessmen and women, higher education, to come up with that consolidated plan. I did have the opportunity to be part of that committee and help shape some of these decisions as we move forward. And then in September of 2017, that plan was submitted to the Department of Education and was approved. So North Dakota does have an approved ESSA plan. Page 42 of our plan looks a little bit at the components that are going to be used to really do the accountability component in our plan. Under No Child Left Behind, the law that was in place before ESSA, we looked at just a few components. We looked at reading, math, graduation rate if it was the high school level, and then attendance. And that was how schools and districts were held accountable. Under the new law, the idea was, let's look at more components, or what really makes up a quality school or education system. So you'll notice on that document, page 42, there's an elementary, and really that should be elementary/middle school, and then a high school component. The reason it doesn't say middle school is just because some districts have different grade bands in different buildings, but here in Fargo, our middle schools would fall under that elementary component. What you'll notice is that there is, at the elementary component, we're still looking at state assessment achievements. So what's in blue? Very similar to what we did under No Child Left Behind, wanting to make sure that our students are proficient in reading and mathematics. But then you'll notice that there's a much broader array of components in that pie. If I go from left to right, the next piece in yellow is student growth. One thing that we've been talking about for many years is how do we look at where a student starts, where a student ends, and then really give credit for a school, a district, to help that student grow to that next level. So that'll be part of the state plan. Below, I'm going to go now from the blue to the right. You'll notice that 10% of the component will be around English learner proficiency. A lot of what we just heard from our last presentation, how are we going to help our students get closer and closer to that level 5 on that WIDA assessment? And then lastly, the 30% of what makes up that score will be climate and engagement. We all know that a school is not just a test score. A school is not just a number, but a school is, what is the climate like? How do I feel warm and welcome as I walk into that building? How engaging is that climate in that building? So you'll notice that our plan for the state of North Dakota will include that. And beginning this year, November through December, across the state of North Dakota, a student engagement survey will be given as baseline information. So we'll be able to look at that and then use that data for the next few years as we create different plans to help with that. The climate component is going to come in a year or two, and that was written into our plan, that we couldn't do all of this at once, but we can do a large portion of it. We'll then add additional climate components, probably surveys similar to what's done through the Advanced Ed accreditation model, but that will come later. At the high school level, you'll notice many of the same components in blue, similar to the blue above. There'll be a state achievement score. There will be growth, again, building in that growth model. And at the next presentation, I would be very happy to go into much more detail about what all of that will be, but please know there is a growth model. Again, there'll be an English learner proficiency component, a graduation component, but what you'll notice now in that purple on that pie chart is giving credit for districts who then provide GED services for students. Because as the state committee came together, we know that some students choose that as their path, some choose high school graduation, but we want to have that part of our plan. And then just like the elementary, there's that section on climate and engagement. So you'll notice as you look at those two different pie charts, what will be used to determine what schools might need targeted or comprehensive assistance in the state are different from what was in No Child Left Behind. What we look at that makes a quality school or a district is different from No Child Left Behind, and that will, I think, help us to move forward with our continuous improvement both here in Fargo but across the state. One thing that, another component that I feel is very good in the state plan is at the high school level, each school district is given the opportunity to determine will they use a more traditional state assessment as that blue component of the state achievement score, or will they look to another assessment, ACT, to be that component? Since all of our students already take either the ACT or the WorkKeys, and for some students, probably look at that in a different light than they would the state assessment, maybe putting a little bit more effort into that than they may in the state assessment, because they know that it will have some ramifications for them for entrance into post-secondary or scholarship and so on. Our district has made the determination really to use that ACT assessment instead of the state assessment for that component. Our principals are very supportive of that decision, and I think it's the right move as we move forward to say what assessment will be more meaningful for our students and what assessment can we use really to help drive what we want to do in continuous improvement across the system. So tonight I just wanted to kind of give you an overview of ESSA, and in particular talk about that decision that we've made looking forward at that high school assessment. And I would answer any questions.
Before you get riddled with questions, and this is just jumping ahead on our agenda, I'll be sharing what governance has identified as the potential board retreat topics, and you'll be happy to know that your alphabet ESSA is at the top of the list. So we're going to take a pretty deep dive at the retreat into ESSA because it's more than a 5 or 15-minute presentation. But questions? Linda?
Just briefly, a couple quick ones. The part of the pie that is climate and engagement, I'm kind of surprised by that had such statewide support. I mean, we've placed so much emphasis on that here in Fargo in recent years, but so is that the feeling of other school districts across the state, or was that something new?
As the committee got together to discuss really what should be in our accountability model, we all came to the table saying one test score or one assessment does not really paint the right picture of the quality of a school or a district. We know how students feel when they walk into the building, when parents walk into the building. We know as we look into the classroom to see if students are engaged in their learning is a critical component of that. So really it was not a difficult conversation to say we need to look at those components moving forward as part of this accountability system.
So do other school districts already have like building by building culture plans and all that kind of stuff?
I think that varies across the state, but what the thing that holds us all together is the majority of us, our advanced ed districts. So we already give the climate survey as part of our advanced ed accreditation. So again, as we look to things that were probably being done but could be used differently, I think that was an easy sell as a committee. But I do think we as the Fargo Public Schools had already been out 1 or 2 steps ahead of many of our peers as we looked at climate being one of our strategic plan initiatives, and that each of our buildings put and created that climate plan each and every year.
And then one more quick question. Down at the bottom, it says, so part of the reason for this accountability of different schools and districts is to see who will, which schools are identified for targeted support. Is that extra state funding? What does that support look like for schools that are struggling?
I think that's another great change from No Child Left Behind to the Every Student Succeeds Act, is in the past there were sanctions almost placed on a school or a district. Dollars that were part of your Title I services needed to be shifted someplace else in the past if you happened to be on one of those two lists. Instead, now the Department of Public Instruction will actually provide assistance to those schools, a very small number, if that is additional professional development, if it's additional help with how do I analyze that data to make a meaningful difference in the lives of my students. Will it be more dollars? I think that part of the plan is still being developed across the system, but the best part is that it will not be a sanction that will be placed on a school or a district.
John?
So we submitted it in May, North Dakota submitted it in May, correct? And it was accepted in September. Were there any changes required in between there or made in between there from Ed?
The committee started its work in May, and there were a series of, I believe, 10 to 12 large group meetings. In addition to that, we broke ourselves into smaller subsets that would work on each of the components of this plan. So I would hate to even guess at the number of additional meetings that we had as we put this together. We did submit the plan to the Department of Education, we meaning the state. They did come back with a few suggestions, and then slight modifications were made to the plan, and I would say slight. I think the work of that committee and the work of the people who helped with that was validated and honored as we move it forward.
One more quick follow-up. I know we were in one of the first batches of states to really get ours out the door and submitted. And with that, I tried to look through a few of them, and it seemed like the states that submitted when I last looked kind of divided into two different types of plans. One group had this kind of dashboard approach, and others had, I would call it like a pass-fail, or like you're an A school, you're a B school, you're a failing school. And maybe this is a topic to maybe ask you now to come back to the forum with, but what are the benefits and drawbacks of each approach, and why did we go this way rather than the other?
I do think that some of the opinions varied on the committee as we looked at what that end product would be. But as we had more and more conversation, truly what we said is this is designed to help us be better. This is designed to help us in our cycle of continuous improvement. And by placing a letter grade or placing a color or placing some other symbol on a school or district, sometimes that gives the wrong impression of what's actually happening in that school. But what will happen is each of these components eventually will be on a dashboard so that all the parents, all the community members can see that data. Again, I think Fargo has maybe taken one or two steps ahead of some of our peers by our strategic plan dashboard, and we do share some of this information already. The thought of using it more as a growth model or a growth opportunity for schools and districts became a higher priority for most of and the majority of the committee than placing a letter grade or a color or some other symbol on that school or district.
Well, thank you, Bob. And as I mentioned, we'll see this topic in detail at the retreat. That gets us through our staff reports, and our next order of business is the consent agenda, and I would entertain a motion.
I move that we accept the consent agenda with the additional HR addendum.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Any opposed signify by saying no. Motion carries. We have one business item this evening, and that's the monitoring reports for our GP 6, 8, 11, 12, 13, and 14. I'd reference you over to memo number 46, and certainly would take a motion.
I move that we accept the reports on GP 6, 8, 11, 12, 13, 14, monitoring document as written.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Ani,
Yes.
Benson,
Yes.
Boyd,
Yes.
Goldenberg,
Yes.
Knutson,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Rodenbiker,
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes. And I want to thank all board members. We had 100% attendance on that one, which was excellent. That gets us to our board reports, committee liaison and correspondence reports. Linda, we'll start with you this evening.
Thank you. I enjoyed my visitations at Eagles Elementary and Davies High School. This time I asked the principals if they could kind of focus our day on what their school and different programs does in terms of community partnerships, collaborations, and volunteerism. So that was fun to kind of see that aspect of things. It was terrific. And just one other thing, the symphony had a concert that featured 3 guest artists, a Syrian-American composer, a Turkish-American, and a Macedonian-American musician. And we brought 2 of them into Carl Ben Ilson, and they gave a presentation and performed for about 100 kids. And the kids were, of course, fantastic and a extraordinarily diverse group of kids. And the expressions on some of their faces, a lot of new Americans in the room, and the expression on their faces, hearing music that to a lot of the kids sounded very foreign, but to them sounded like home, was fantastic. And so it got picked up on TV, so that was great.
Rebecca.
My report is that last week I was at Lincoln, and my 2 other visits are upcoming, so that's it. Thank you.
Jennifer.
I had some time to spend over at Jefferson the other day, and I think we all attended the joint meeting. When it sounds like I've added to my list to reach out to Tamra, one of the social workers here from Jefferson. I think that would be a good liaison visit opportunity as well, so I'll spend some more time over there. GAC's next meeting is, I believe, tentatively as of now, is November 21st at 7:30 a.m. Health Insurance Committee met this afternoon and reviewed the presentations that are going to be offered for staff on November 9th, basically highlighting the differences between the 2017 and 18 plan, as well as highlighting again the HSA details and offerings, opportunities there for staff. Flu shots came up again, and I just thought that this was pertinent information maybe for city PTA as well. In the past, and this is my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, our schools partnered with, or our PTAs partnered with a 7-day clinic to offer flu shot, basically injection sites for our parents and students, and I believe had a very high participation rate. And so today when they mentioned the number of 600, I asked the question, it seemed so much lower. Well, it's currently just for staff because there's been a changeover in ownership of 7-day clinic. So having said that, it sounds like Sanford and North have something going. So perhaps there's still an opportunity there for our PTAs to make that connection with Sanford, to offer it to more of our students and families. So I thought that was something worthy of passing on and continuing the conversation around. And that's all I have.
John.
I attended the joint meeting of the schools and parks and city last Tuesday. Jim, thank you for your comments there of our successes and challenges. I think it was very on point and appreciated by me at least. November 11th, Saturday, I hope you all have on your calendars negotiations training. We've confirmed Mr. Andy Seaver from the Montana State School Board Association will be coming to help us out as we prepare for negotiations. Planning for about 4 hours. Promise to get you all out of here in time for the Bison versus South Dakota football game.
Thank you.
And that's my report. Thank you.
President, can I ask Mrs. Benson a question quick? Did you say November 24th for the GAC meeting?
21st.
Thank you very much.
Brandy.
Okay, today I had a meeting with the Fargo Youth Initiative. It's a group that has been together now, I guess, for 6 years. And I was on that committee last year, and it's the students are really engaged in this committee, and I think they have a lot of awesome ideas that they're coming up with, and I think it's going to be really neat this year. And I have reached out to the city PTA. Nikki's on there, so I will be connecting with them, and then I do plan on doing my PTA meetings for my school liaison as well. Thank you.
Thank you. David?
I have nothing new to report.
Dinah?
Just a reminder again that the next Communication Committee meeting is November the 17th at 7:30 in the morning. And since our last meeting, I've been out to the Longfellow PTA.
Thank you. The President's report, which is produced by Anne Marie, full disclosure, I think got passed around to everybody. I do want to highlight a couple of things, several which are highlighted. John mentioned our November 11th training, but of course, also mark on your calendar February 2nd. That's the date for our board retreat. Thus far, the topics that we've identified, and by no means does this mean we're done. Other ideas can certainly be shared. And if you have a topic you'd like us to consider for the board retreat, reach out to either myself or Anne Marie and let us know what that is. And we're going to try and finalize the agenda for the retreat at our next governance meeting. But right now, the topics that are front and center are a deeper understanding of foundation aid and actually all state funding sources, because it's not just foundation aid, and in particular, understanding how the mill levy offset works, so we can have intelligent conversation with those people that craft this legislation and help them understand what they've put in front of us. We're going to take a look at some components of our long-range facility plan, a number of different things that we've heard about at different times, from what we've come up with for the Level 4 program that's being researched currently, along with the capacity report that I know Dr. Gross has been working on, probably with Dr. Agri, on what the true capacities of all of our buildings are based upon the real utilization that we have to have, not just the fact that it's a classroom, should have 24 people in it. Well, we may need it for other purposes too, based upon our education delivery today. As I mentioned earlier, ESSA, we're going to take a pretty deep dive to hopefully get all of us comfortable with what are the changes coming at us, what are the timelines for some of those changes. Possibly we'll be taking a look at, understanding the curriculum review process a little deeper. It depends on how many topics we get. Something could get bumped. But if you have other topics that you'd like us to consider, please get them to Anne Marie or myself, so we'll have them for the next governance meeting, and we can finalize that. Two other date things that each of you have to keep in mind. First is November 28th. At our November 28th board meeting is where we'll be really addressing the fall school visits. So make sure, I know many of them have already happened, many are already scheduled, and you have that reporting form. I just wanted to let you know when we're going to be addressing that at the boardroom here, and that will be on November 28th. And then for those of you going out to Bismarck this week, we're going to split the sharing of your highlight moments from the conference into two groups. At our November 14th meeting, I would like Rebecca, Jennifer, John, and myself to report out. And then on November 28th, Dinah, Dave, Christy, and Brandy. And if you want to give us an anecdotal report of whatever happened in Fargo while we're gone, you can just jam it in wherever you'd like. One last thing, at least from my perspective, I'd like to share. We did take a look, and I think probably everybody saw it if you looked at the governance agenda materials, but I want to personally thank all board members for completing the superintendent evaluation, part one. We'll be taking a look at that at one of our November meetings as well, and of course we'll have a second round of that that'll come in the spring. I think that's it. Although, as long as it's on the calendar, I might as well point it out, it's never too early to ask for door prizes, because we have the summer picnic booked for 2018 on August 1st. So now's the time, especially for those of you that might be thinking about not being on the board at that point in time. And without any other business in front of us, we will be adjourned until our next regular meeting, which is on November 14th. And for all of those of you going to Bismarck, safe travels out there, and we'll see you either Wednesday or Thursday or Friday, depending upon when you might be getting out there. We're adjourned.